Hey, everybody, welcome to another amazing episode of Soul Chat. My name is Ebony Tutora. And while I would love to introduce myself, welcome back to all of you avid listeners as well as new listeners. But I have an amazing guest with me today, which I'm so excited to have this conversation, especially as we've kind of sort of stepped out of the Christmas, Thanksgiving, cringy kind of time where we don't know what to do with some of those toxic family members or the transitioning relationships in our lives. So I thought this was a perfect time to really have this beautiful guest on just to share with her tips and some of the things she's helping others navigate so that we can navigate it too. And I say we because it's me. I always tell you guys, this is a conversation I'm having with you and myself. Because this is life and we are all growing and journeying to our best selves. So the amazing soul that I have here with me is Justine Carino. She is a licensed mental health counselor and host of Thoughts from the Couch podcast. Justine currently maintains a private practice in New York and Connecticut, and she helps individuals and families decrease symptoms of anxiety and depression, improve their relationships, and set better boundaries, help them create lives that feel in alignment with their values. Justine has over 12 years of experience using both cognitive behavioral therapy techniques and family system techniques when working with her clients. Justine's advice has been featured in various media outlets such as Cosmo, the Huffington Post, News 12 Westchester, and the Self Helpless podcast. She has also been a speaker at top corporations, including Eileen Fisher and Lockheed Martin, and interviewed on over 40 podcasts. So this would be over 40 something to add to it. Her services can be found at carinocounseling.com, which we'll talk more about that at the end, where to find her, where to make sure you're staying in touch with her so you can stay in touch with another person that will add to your toolbox. So Justine, welcome to the Soul Chat family.
Hi, Ebony. Thank you so much for having me. You're just such a delight and positive energy, and I'm so happy to just share this time with you today.
Yes, I'm so excited. Honestly, I'm really excited about these questions. And I know we're coming out of that season where a lot of that tension really is in like November, December, where people are just really learning how to navigate. And I think it's a new thing where people are more comfortable with navigating those spaces without feeling like they have to suffocate themselves. But it's something we're doing all year, right? Relationships are seasonal, relationships have things, ups and downs. But before we jump into the juicy stuff, we need the juicy information of who are you in your own words? And then you can just from the
Yeah.
heart share with us who you are.
Yeah. So I am a woman. I am married. I have two little children, a boy and a girl, aged 4 and 7.
Oh,
I run a group private practice, which is really such a passion of mine. I wake up really excited every single day. I feel very lucky to love my career choice. Um, and I'm just in this phase of really trying to constantly balance how present I want to be with my family, how present I want to be in my career, but also I have all these big ideas too about other things I want to do. So I feel like I'm constantly, every day I wake up with excitement about what I want to do next, but also frustration of I don't have enough minutes in the day to get everything done. And I have to balance and prioritize.
yeah.
And I'm a perfectionist, and I talk a lot to women that are also perfectionists. I'm someone that has had bouts with anxiety in the past too. So despite being able to treat people, I've experienced it myself as well.
Yeah. Yeah, which is so real. And it's amazing that you're living in purpose. If you're waking up and you love what you do, they say that's because you're living in your purpose. And I can't wait to just maybe at the end we'll talk about some of your big ideas if you just want to just put them out there into the universe and give
Yeah,
them a place to live.
I love that.
Yeah, because I know that once we're doing anything, we're meant to continue to grow and to continue to expand. And sometimes it's even a deviation from maybe what we're already doing. So, um, I'm really excited about this conversation because I know so many people are going to take away, including myself, how we are navigating not only our families, but even like a lot of blended families. I think this is a big generation of having a lot of different blended families and making it okay where it's not like this
Mhm.
taboo thing where people are shaming and guilting you for the choices you've made. So how would you say that our family origin has influenced our adult relationships, whether that's romantically with our friends, coworkers?
Yeah, absolutely. It's interesting. I feel like we've been in a societal phase of being very individualistic,
Hmm.
and about ourselves and realizing that we could create lives for ourselves, which I think is amazing. But we've really gone away from what used to be way back in the day of families being very closely tied together, families depending on extended family members for
Yeah.
childcare, for emotional support, this and that. And there are some cultures
Hmm.
that still stay very closely connected to families, but I think we're also kind of in this phase of people cutting off family and
Hmm.
disconnecting from family, right? And what I want everyone to understand is our family of origin, the people that raised us, whether they're biological, step parents, grandparents, whoever it was, the people that raised us and spent time with us in those early years, they were kind of this template for us of teaching us and modeling to us how we process our emotions, how we communicate with other people, how we set boundaries, how we make decisions, right? And so it's really this blueprint that we subconsciously default to over and over again. And sometimes that blueprint was perfect, right? Rarely, but sometimes it was great. And it's good that we're repeating these things. But
Hmm.
most of the time, there's some mistakes in there. There's some things that could be tweaked and worked on. And we keep repeating patterns by default until we learn, wait, this way of being doesn't really work for me as
Yeah.
an adult woman anymore. And just because my mother or grandmother did things this way doesn't mean I have to repeat them that way. And we
Hmm.
repeat what we don't change. We subconsciously reenact family relationships and dynamics with our friends, with our coworkers, with our romantic partners, because
Yeah.
it's just comfortable to reenact it this way. But sometimes what's comfortable can be a little dysfunctional, and we have to learn how to become and relate differently. And this
Yeah.
is when clients say to me, "Oh my God, I married my father," or "Oh my God, I married my mother. I can't believe it. There's so much similarity between my
Yeah.
partner and this parent or this adult in my life."
Yeah. And that's a wake-up call. That's a wake-up call.
Absolutely.
As you were saying that, I was like, I remember, I mean, even bosses. I remember one boss specifically, I swear everything about her, down to her facial expressions, was like my mother.
Hmm.
And navigating that relationship, once I kind of woke up to what was replaying in that scenario and took my power back and decided how I was going to show up. And I'm like, I'm not a kid. Like, I guess she's the CEO, but I don't have to be silent
Yeah.
and I don't have to do what I would have typically done as a trauma response to that experience. So I love that you said that because I think sometimes many people don't really awaken to that, right? Or they
Yeah.
want to, I hear a lot of adults say, which sometimes it's almost cringy to me a little bit because I think we try to, everyone's aware of this healing energy and like the need to heal and like I can go different places. I remember being in the dentist hearing them like chuckle about healing things and I'm like it's so much deeper than that. There's surface
Mhm.
level understanding and then there's the implementation of like but really how is that showing up? No one is exempt from it. There's no even if you've
Mhm.
had the most perfect upbringing, a lot of times we'll say, well, they'll say, well, my parents did their best. Yeah, but when you were a child, you didn't think that. You know
Yes.
what I mean? You weren't like, they're doing their best right now. You know what I mean? You didn't have
No,
that wisdom.
absolutely. And what's interesting too? I see a variety of families. See families that are highly dysfunctional and highly functional and everything in between.
Yeah.
For the most part, parents are trying to do the best that they can. And
Hmm.
some of the trauma we experience as their children really wasn't intentional. It was just a byproduct of a dynamic per se that
Yeah.
as a kid or a teenager, you're right, we couldn't understand it. We didn't think our parents were doing the best they could. We were pissed at them and we were
Yeah.
rejecting them. We are angry, right? So sometimes like the anger we have towards family members, like if we kind of look at their perspective, sometimes we could see, oh, that's the only skills they had. They were only equipped with this much at the time, and that's why they handled it. And there's no malice or malintent towards us.
Yeah. Yeah, which is challenging for people to understand. I think on the variations of stories and things that you can hear from people, whether it's they were adopted, I've heard people that were raised by aunts and told the other, the parents didn't exist, just a whole kind of array of stories.
Hmm.
I think it is challenging for people as adults. I'm sure you do see this actually, is some people who are still holding on to that anger and being upset with. I think that's probably the number one thing I see is us. I call it demotion. Like you have to demote the parent from the pedestal of parent. Because to
Yeah.
your point, if they didn't have the capacity, you're holding them to it's like a job. It's like if you walk into a store and you say, "Can I speak with the manager?" I always give this example because I think if you experience it in real life, you'd be like, "Oh my God, who are you?" And the person says to you, "I'm the manager," and who the beep are you? You would be like, "Wow,
Yeah.
you are not a good fit for this position," right? And I think
Yeah.
as adults, we do sometimes hold on to so many grudges. Or I've at least heard some of my family members, just complain or share stories about their parents, and it's like, well, you're an adult now, so you have to be able to navigate that in a healthy way. How do you help people navigate just really letting that go and really stepping into the next phase of healing?
Yeah, I'm so glad you brought it up because right now I'm working with a family. They're all adults, right? The
Mhm.
children are in their 30s, and I'm working with them and their parents. And one of the adult daughters is really angry about something that happened 15 years ago with an extended
Mm,
family member, something traumatic, and
mm,
is feeling very angry about not being feeling as though she was taken care of in the way she needed to,
yeah,
and is showing up now as a 30 something year old, and she's saying like I'm ready to forgive, and I that's my work now, is to work on healing and work on forgiveness. But part of that is a tool I use called the genogram, and this is my most favorite tool ever as a therapist. I do it with every single client, and it's when I do a 3 generation family tree, and we look at my client, their parents, and their grandparents. And I use this in every session, and I'm writing in details, right? I want to know culture, race, religion. I want to know education levels. I want to know history of jobs. I want to know trauma. I want to know cutoff. I want to know
mm,
conflict. It's a map, right? And I'm constantly looking at this map and connecting dots, weaving the past to the present. And I always tell clients, if you really want to work on forgiveness with your parents, we really need to get to know your grandparents.
yeah,
We need to go and figure out who were your grandparents, what were their story, what was going on in their life at the time, how did they parent your parents? That shows us the map your parents had, and then how they then parented you. And it
yeah,
gives people another perspective or understanding of perhaps intergenerational trauma, things that have been passed down, where people came from, where their beliefs about how things should function in this family came from. And once people can start to open themselves up to connect to these grandparents and ask their parents questions about their upbringing, and ask aunts and uncles and relatives, and really get a narrative of who they are and where they come from, they can start to open up space for understanding of, oh, this is why my parents were the way they were.
yeah, 1000%. 1000%. That was actually one of the things I did in beginning of my journey was just asking my parents questions because I definitely had a lot of resentment towards both
Mm,
of my parents for a long time where I just even God, I was like, why would you give me such parents? Like, it just doesn't
mm-hmm,
make sense to me.
mm-hmm.
And then you begin to hear their story, and you recognize and realize that, to your point, they're only doing what they think was best, even if it wasn't the best, even if like logically you're like, how could you have thought that was the best thing? Do you find that there is almost like, I guess something I've learned as a young person is I would look at sometimes the adults around me and I would almost like pick and choose who I would listen to because I would feel like, okay, you're an adult, but I don't feel like you're mature. Like I don't feel like that's a mature conversation or
Yeah.
something you did or maybe just certain behavior. Do you find that there is certain points in our lives where it's almost like stunted growth, where like maybe something traumatic happens and we kind of just like it's almost like we stay there. We stay there, and there's a part of us that doesn't exactly evolve into what would be the wisdom and the growth that we take from it. Because forgiveness that's a lot of growth, is
Yes.
to be able to forgive someone. It's like it's just one of those words that encompasses like 30 other words. So it's not
Mm.
just a word, it's a feeling, it's a way of expansion that takes a lot of hard work or hard, depending on how you're thinking about it, to really work through. So do you find that people do kind of get stunted in their like psychological growth of like being able to um fully express like adulthood and be mature?
100%, absolutely. In the field, the first and foremost is any type of trauma. If someone's experienced significant trauma, they're usually parts of themselves are still stuck at that age, whether the trauma happened at 5, 10, 15, 21.
Yeah,
We're all made of a bunch of parts. Some parts of ourselves still get stuck there because the trauma interferes with our ability to process and
hmm,
develop and mature psychologically. So
yes,
sometimes when someone's experienced trauma, we're like, oh, that 15-year-old's popping out now, making your
mm,
decisions, or that 7-year-old is making your decisions. This is your inner child needing to heal a little bit. Let's talk
yeah,
about this. So trauma is one. Also, substance abuse. I've worked with a lot of people in
mm,
recovery who have been addicted to alcohol or any other substances. While you're actively abusing, you're usually stuck at that stage because you can't grow while you're
yeah,
dependent on a substance. So I have a guy who abused substances probably like 18 to 30, and I met him at 34. And
okay,
he's like now recovered and ready to get his life on track. And we always joke, I'm like, you're living your 20s now. Like you can't think
yeah,
of yourself as a 34-year-old,
oh my God,
34
so
year old.
true.
You are now a 20-year-old. So don't be so
Yeah,
hard on yourself because he's
hmm,
pissed at like, why don't I have a partner? Why don't I have the career I want?
mm.
Why? I'm like, well, the time you were supposed to be figuring that out, you were abusing substances.
Oh, that's so good.
And so sometimes that addiction and substance abuse stunts our emotional and um, career growth, so many parts
Hmm.
of ourselves.
Yeah. Oh, that was so good. I'm so happy you said that. I don't think I've ever heard anyone really put it like that because I do, you can see it. You can see it in how someone operates and also to give ourselves grace and forgiveness. A lot of times I try to, me and my friends laugh about this all the time because I was recently talking with a friend and it's not that, I think everyone has some weight that we carry, some things that we're navigating. It's just life. It doesn't matter who you are. It doesn't
Mhm.
matter what degree you have. It doesn't matter who you know. It doesn't matter how much money you have. We all have things and we were laughing saying, hey, most of the people we look up to are like in their 50s, you know? So
Yes.
why am I pressuring myself to just have it all together? But I love that you did mention even substance abuse and how that can kind of get in the way. Because I know I almost say this laughably because I think whether you're thinking about the 70s or even thereafter, because that was like a big acceptable substance abuse time, right? Where everyone was
Yeah,
like,
it was
free
okay.
love.
No,
Yeah.
yeah, it was
Like we're
allowed.
all doing it. Everyone's doing it. What?
Yep,
Right?
yep.
And that's why I said we have to forgive ourselves. If you were 80s babies, like come on, 80s and 90s, those are our
Yeah.
parents. But needless to say, just really honoring the journey of our lives and just the things that sometimes get in the way and not to shame and guilt ourselves through that process. So how do we all develop roles in our family of origin that we tend to subconsciously replicate throughout our lives? Um,
Yeah.
I think we
Yeah.
kind of talked about that, but can you specifically speak to the roles?
Absolutely. For some reason, I'm so attracted to this exact conversation because it comes up over and over again in sessions and light bulbs go off
Mhm.
for people. So, you know, the family is the template, right? And we work as a system, right? And everyone kind of has a role in this family system: mom, dad, kids, aunt, uncle, grandma, grandpa. But then there's
Mhm.
also other roles that are subconscious, not discussed, but kind of everybody knows. Like if I asked
Mhm.
you to say, who was the problem child in the family? Who was the peacekeeper? Who was the golden child, right? We all can be like,
Peacekeeper.
oh, that was me or that was
Right,
her, right? And
right,
then
right.
we can relate to that, right? So we all of these roles were actually a survival mechanism to keep the
Hmm.
homeostasis of the family, to keep things together so
Yeah.
the wheels don't fall off, right?
Hmm.
One role that's common is the parentified child. And this is the child who stepped up to kind of like a overly responsible role prematurely. because
Yeah.
something was lacking in one of the parents or both, right?
Yeah.
Maybe there was a death. Dad died, mom no longer had partner. So oldest
Mhm.
daughter stepped up and kind of became the dad or the
Yeah.
second mom or the
Yeah.
caretaker. Maybe there was a divorce. Maybe there was a substance abusing parent. Maybe there's a mentally ill parent. Maybe there was a parent so severely depressed. Who knows what was going on? But the parents couldn't maintain that hierarchy of that system. So a
Yeah.
child, it's usually the oldest, steps in to become the responsible one and fill that gap. And if it's not the oldest stepping in, it's one of the other children, probably the second oldest or third. And then that's also a clue for me. Why didn't the oldest step up to parentify a child? What was that person dealing with at the time? Was that the
Mm.
problem child at the time? So we kind of fill these roles. Now, another example of this could be sometimes the rebel child, and I work with teens too, so I love meeting the black sheep, the rebel, the problem child in the family. Usually
Mhm.
they're keeping the family together in some way and by distraction, right?
Mm.
Maybe let's think of a scenario. Maybe mom and dad can't stand each other. They're together, they're separated, who knows? They can't stand each other. But the one time they get in the same room and agree is when they're disciplining the problem child or
Mm.
they're called to the principal's office. And the
Yeah.
kid gets a secondary benefit of my parents are together and they're actually getting along. And so my subconscious negative acting out is showing my parents they need each other to parent me, or vice versa.
Mhm.
Maybe there's a parent who's very depressed and they have an overachieving child. And now we have the golden child emerge. My mom lights up when I get those A's. My mom is on the
Mm.
sidelines cheering for me because I'm the quarterback of the
Yeah.
football team. The only
Mm.
time I see her smile is when I'm achieving greatness. So now that becomes an addiction. I must always be that golden child because now I want my mom to be happy. So there's
Yeah.
so many interesting dynamics that emerge, and we take on certain roles to keep the family moving forward.
Yeah, that's so deep. I don't know if you know this, I'm a mom of five. So as you were saying that, I was like pinpointing different things.
I
We
did
also,
not know you were a
yeah,
mom of five.
you didn't know. Now you know. I
Now
know.
I
Make
know.
it look so good, right?
Yeah.
This is a PSA for all those out there looking to have more kids. You can still look good, be successful, and all the
And
things.
I didn't even know that you had five.
If you want my workout plan, let me know.
Yeah.
And how I balance it all. But yeah, as you were saying that, I was just thinking of each child and just some of the things we navigated. I always laugh with people and I say, I don't, I share the techniques that I'm learning in life. I share the things that I've learned thus far. There was this guy that was saying, a lot of what we see online, it's like the highlights of people's lives. And like, I make my kids, 3 meals a day, and my husband, like, buys me, roses that I can't even carry, and we're just like comparing our lives to everything. And I said, well, I don't really share my life because A, it's not about me and what I do, and B, like my life is real, like I don't need to share all the stories. You guys get the wisdom enough to understand. I know some things.
Yes.
So as you
Yes.
were talking, I was just thinking about the different things we've navigated. We definitely have a blended family that caused a lot of just like, in the kids,
Mhm.
things came up, and things still come up to this day. How do you, as you were talking about roles, how do we as parents that can learn these things, how do we help? First of all, I guess I was identifying as you were speaking about it, but how do we help our children? um I almost want to say we let them be children. It's not because I think there's a good and a bad to it. Like them being the golden child, it's not the worst thing, but also we don't want them to always think it's about achievement, right? If there's just
Absolutely.
whatever role they fall into, like as you said, I'm like, yeah, my oldest definitely did not step up as the mature one. And I can identify the things that she was navigating that, I mean, even to this day, she wants to relinquish the role. She's getting older where she's understanding, well, I could have more
Mm.
responsibility, so I should probably get it together.
Mm-hmm.
And I know
Mm-hmm.
I've changed as a mom, just really not being in that reactionary mode and because even though we can know this, I'm not sure if you agree, but even though we can know this stuff and we can know the science behind it, when you are in your real life, real family, that doesn't mean it clicks in for you. Do you know what I'm saying? You know what I
Absolutely.
mean? Where
Oh,
you're like,
it's so hard. And I think what's hard for like our women our age as parents, our generation of parents, we have too much information that
yeah.
it gets very confusing. And then we're constantly worried, like, did I say the right thing? Did I do
Right.
the wrong thing?
Oh my
I'm
God,
not supposed to yell, but I'm supposed to discipline. And it creates such turmoil. I'm like, I want it all to kind of go away. I wish I knew less,
yeah, for
right?
sure, for
And our
sure.
parents came from a generation like they didn't really know much at all. Maybe there's like one or two parenting books out there. And now every day on my feed, it's like, this is your parenting technique of the day. I'm like, get it
Right.
out. So, like, I want us to be a little bit, right? And not
Yeah,
overanalyze ourselves, but at the same time, we could be mindful of the roles that are existing.
yeah.
I can give a quick example. My son's only in second grade. By nature, he was born competitive, right? In first
Mhm.
grade, if you read 100 books, you got a ribbon. He had to make sure he read those 100 books to get his ribbon, right? He was
Yeah.
addicted to the competition, right? I'm like, okay, by nature, you're that way. But also, I'm like, how do we reinforce this? And the
Yeah.
example is like, when he came home, how'd you do on your spelling test? What'd you get? Right? So immediate connection is tell me how much you achieved today, right? And
Yeah.
so now I'm trying to be conscious of that and not even ask about the spelling test until he brings it up. And he even said
Mm.
yesterday, I was going through his math homework and he had a few mistakes. I helped him correct it. And he said, is it okay that I made those mistakes, Mommy? I said, yeah, it's okay you made those mistakes. Like, it's your homework. I want you to
Yeah.
make mistakes. We learn from them. So I'm just trying to be cautious of like his temperament is to be the competitor, is to be the perfectionist, probably will be my golden child in comparison to my daughter. I already see it, but I'm trying
Mhm.
hard not to reinforce and connect with him through praise. I want to connect with him
Mhm.
in other ways, right? So it's just being conscious and mindful of like, who are your kids? What roles are they falling into? And can you think about not reinforcing that role so it's not an extreme? It only is a sometimes, if that makes
Yeah.
sense.
Oh, it does. I think I'm doing a great job then.
Good, good.
Because you're so right. I remember, I mean, like, I have such great grandparents, and you talked about like the hierarchy of families, and I
Yeah.
try to identify like what's really missing. You know what I mean? What is the glue that really held me together as a young person who,
Mm.
I mean, if you knew my life, I mean, like, even my grandparents say all the time, we're so proud of you with like just the life you've been given, all the things you've overcome. And I'm like, y'all were amazing. Like
Yeah.
my grandmother, still to this day, God bless her soul, she's living. My grandfather, I
Mm.
mean, they never gave up on just sharing lessons with me. They never gave up, even if it was just subtle, even if it was, I'm leaving from visiting my grandmother, she hands me a whole bag of like all her free beauty supplies she's ever gotten, some magazines, but I never grew up hearing certain things. I was always told I was capable. They never made me aware. I came from a mixed family. So my mother was white, my father was black. I didn't grow up, because some mixed kids do. I didn't grow up with the dynamic of you're this or no, you're that, or your hair is bad, or I didn't hear all of that stuff.
Mhm.
So I'm very aware and almost feel privileged that to some degree there was glue that held me together. I also had my father's mom, who was a strong woman, who was very outspoken. She was almost the opposite of my other grandmother, where she was strong, but she was more laid back. Like, she's going to tell you
Yeah.
about yourself without really saying much, where my other grandmother, she's going to tell you in every word possible, But I
Yes,
do try to think of that, because I think I feel very blessed to have had that
absolutely.
level of relation and maturity from multiple people. It's not just my grandparents, my
Yes.
aunt and my uncle, just examples that weren't in my household. And I always share this with my aunt because, in my household, there was domestic violence.
Mm.
And I remember spending a lot of time with my aunt and uncle as I got older. I would go there like almost every summer. I remember one moment that I always remember is I knew he was angry at her. And he said honey in a deep tone, like honey, with like teeth, the
You
teeth.
knew.
Yeah. And I was like, ooh. And I was like, nice. That feels nice. That feels nice that he's addressing her. I know he's angry with her, but he's addressing her in such an endearing way that's not like this over the top form of
Yeah.
anger. Not to say I didn't
Yeah.
repeat some of it, to a certain extent for a while in my life. When you talked about the roles and how we show up and how we replay these same dynamics. But
Yes. But you bring up a good point, extended family members, aunts, uncles, grandparents, they could be protective factors, right? If our parents aren't emotionally mature enough or have their challenges or something's going on where they can't show up for us, these other connections are so important. And they could be gifts that we learn from. Like I'm even thinking like my own family, my parents are now divorced. They divorced when I was an adult, but I grew up with them fighting all the time, right? And my mom feels bad about that. And that's my template is fighting, fighting, fighting. And I remember going to hang out with my cousin and my godmother and her husband, and their house was always very quiet, peaceful, no fighting. And I remember even as a kid being like, wow, these people don't yell, they don't fight with each other. Till this
Yeah.
day, I'm in awe watching them communicate, my godparents. And I'm like, wow,
Hmm.
like, do you ever right? And it's just so different. But that was a
Yeah.
model of like, oh, people can have differences and communicate
Yes.
effectively without yelling a blowout fight, you know? So there are nice models out there, and it's important. And that's why it
Mhm.
also makes me sad. I think there's a big trend of like people cutting off their parents. So then their kids don't know their parents, their kids don't have grandparents. And I'm always sad when I see that. I'm like, oh man, those kids are really missing out on a grandparent relationship.
Yeah.
Listen, I get it. If there was some type of abuse, sure, we got to cut people out. But if you're just mad at how they parented you, oh, I hope we could
Mhm.
work through that. I hope your kids could have grandparents that they connect
Yeah.
to.
I'm not an advocate of that. I'm not an advocate of, I think I can recognize when my inner child gets in the way. I can recognize when it's a
Yeah.
me thing. You know what I mean? I think if you have a healthy grandparent who wants to be in that child's life, aunt, uncle, whatever, who is healthy. You know what I mean? We do have to pay attention to
Yeah.
that. It's not just about title and, well, I'm the grandparent, but I don't agree with getting in the way of that connection. There are
Yep.
definitely things with certain family members I don't agree with whatsoever. But if they want to FaceTime them all day and like, I'm just like, have at it. Like,
Yes.
they need you too. And I know that even on the reciprocal side, there are a lot of things that, at least this is my belief. I believe while we are guides and teachers and however we like to show up for our children, I believe our teaching, if we're listening, our children teach us too. Because I don't know about you, but my kids check me all the time since they were little. You know what I mean? Like,
Yes.
especially my son Levi, he's about to be 6, and I think out of all of them, he's been the most. He's one of those that you're like, you lived many lifetimes. Well, he'll just like that doesn't make sense. I was in school and I was talking, but I don't think talking's a bad thing. Like I should be talking. They want me to be quiet. I don't have to always be quiet. Like, and I'm like, you got a point there, bud. But
Yes. Yes, they are so smart. They pick up on things. I know it's funny. My daughter, she's 4, and she asked to do ice skating lessons, and she just cries and cries because she's terrified. We got through it. We got her through her
Mhm.
fear, but she would cry, and then she came off the ice and said, I'm crying, mommy. I said, it's okay to cry. I'm a therapist. I'm always telling my kids, cry. You need to cry. It's okay to cry anywhere. And she said, well, my coach says I can't cry. I'm like, well, let me tell that coach you can cry, right? I'm like, it's just, she's picking up like, wait, you're telling me I can cry, but my coach is saying
Oh
I can't
yes.
cry on the ice. Like they pick up on these differences and bring it to life. And then they make
Yeah.
you question, well, what is the right way to approach the crying situation with my daughter? But
Mhm.
they're so perceptive and they pick up on so many things and they make you question things.
They do. Oh my God. It reminds me of this reel someone sent me of like our kids going to therapy as like 30 something year old people.
Oh, I think I've seen this.
And
It's
he's
Daryl,
like,
right?
my parents loved me so much. I had every electronic device. How many electronic devices do you need?
I love that one. I think I saw it. It's great.
Hilarious. And it's like,
Hilarious.
say all that to say the 2 points. The first point that you made, where there's so much information. If there's so much information, I almost laugh when people get upset with gentle parenting because the perception of gentle parenting is you just let them do whatever they want. No, I'm managing my inner child so that
Mm-hmm.
I'm not giving them, imbalanced
Mm-hmm.
responses because I haven't dealt with my own stuff. I mean, any inner child book I've read at least says the first section is like, let's talk about you.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Children's book, right?
Yes.
But the
Yes.
over information of like what that looks like, and to your point, where you're like, do I let them cry? Do I not let them like what do
Yes.
I do? Knowing we're doing our best, and really just being grounded. That's my thing in life. It's just like just being grounded enough to be intuitively led, especially as a parent, to know that we are doing our best. We are literally doing our best. And I think if you're at least conscious enough to try to make the change and research and read and learn, you can't fault yourself. Who's to
No.
say they're not going to need some type of therapy? At least we'll be evolved enough to go with them and listen.
Yeah, exactly. We'll attend the family therapy session with them.
Exactly,
I'm
right?
down for it.
With an open heart, with no, with at least an open heart enough to listen and we listen and we don't judge.
Exactly, exactly. Yeah.
How do this is really this last question. I'm like, oh, this is one of the ones that I think even myself have found it can be challenging. And I think just any dynamic as an adult is challenging if you still have adults that don't want to play nice.
Yes.
That's how I consider. I'm like, you
Yeah.
just did not learn how to play nice yet. Like, come on, we
Mm-hmm.
gotta play nice. I mean,
Yeah.
play nice and pretend.
Yes.
Until we figure this out. So, how is enmeshment and fusion in families? What is that process of differentiation?
Yeah, this is a big question, and I'm gonna go off for a little bit and interrupt me if I
Okay.
lose you. So the process of differentiation is this theory that Dr. Murray Bowen created. He was a psychiatrist, and it's this ability for us to begin to think as individuals, right, separating from our family of origin while also staying meaningfully connected to them, right? The more differentiated or more developed a person's sense of self is, the less impact other people have on them, right? Or
Mhm.
have on their functioning. So if a family has members who are well differentiated, they can sit at a dinner right now and disagree about politics, which many
Yeah.
people are right now, but not cut each other off, not
Mhm.
say you'll never see them again. They can have a conversation and say, okay, you believe that, I believe this, we'll agree to disagree. Still love you. I'll see you next week for
Yeah,
Sunday dinner, right?
absolutely.
That's a well differentiated family. That's really hard to achieve. But those are
Mhm.
people who are not getting triggered by each other and feel like they really have to defend their point of view and win in an argument, right? They respect each other's differences. Someone with a less differentiated sense of self, other people impact them easily.
Yeah.
They try to control the functioning of others. And so while our self is kind of innate, our family system can influence our process of differentiation because this was modeled to our parents, as we said, go back to the grandparents. So a person with a well differentiated sense of self can depend on other people in a healthy way, but
Mm.
also stay calm and clear-headed in conflict and think through what they're about to say and do and how they react.
Mm.
They're not going to get as triggered by rejection or differences. And
Yeah.
enmeshment is this blending of self with another self, right? When boundaries in a relationship become too permeable or unclear, and it kind of leads to a loss of sense of self. And we can see
Mhm.
this a lot with mothers and children, right? And a lot of
Mhm.
people fall into this very easily until we pull ourselves out of it.
Yeah.
We can see this in codependent partnerships and marriages. And enmeshment is kind of like when we get enmeshed and ingrained with other people's emotions, we're constantly thinking about how to keep them, the other person, whether it's our child or a partner, emotionally well. And we really invest all of our time and energy in this codependent kind of phase. Does that
Mhm.
make sense?
Oh, it does. As you were speaking about all of it, I've thought about either people that I am aware of. I think I have I how did okay, let me just it does make sense. Yes, which is so funny because I just heard this psychologist say we should stop saying doesn't make sense because it discounts what we said or it says are you smart enough? So the age of information, right? You're like, ugh. Anyways, literally today too.
That's
So
funny.
yeah, it just had me thinking about how that applies or just like certain people that popped to mind. How does one learn to differentiate themselves
Mm-hmm.
and create that? Because essentially it's almost like the boundaries we create, mental boundaries, essentially, I would think the mental boundaries that we create that we can say, yes, I've come from this family, this is who we are as a unit, and this is who mom and dad and whomever brothers, whoever
Mm-hmm.
is. However, I'm choosing whatever that choice is. Like, what are the processes of even people getting to that space I think it was like, it's like awareness of within yourself.
It's awareness, it's the therapy, it's the work. It's a lot of work. It takes a lot of effort. If you feel like you can differentiate more, well, first
Mhm.
you have to have the awareness that like, oh, I'm a little enmeshed with this person, or
Yeah.
I'm too highly react. It could go either way.
Yeah.
Like too involved, too close, too tight, or very distant. Distance can also be a form of enmeshment, believe it or not. It's like I'm
Mm-mm.
too reactive to you that I need to keep you really far away. We have
Yeah.
to learn how to communicate with a little bit more closeness, right? So it's
Yeah.
first it's an awareness to the dynamic in the relationship. Then it's understanding your own role in it because we can't ever control the other person. We can only
Mhm.
control what you're doing and thinking. And
Yeah.
what I do a lot of coaching with my clients to have a conversation with a parent or with a child. I have a lot of women that are the doers, the fixers, right? And they have their hands in all their kids' stuff all the time and their partner, and they're exhausted and burnt out from it. So their homework might be like, sit on your hands this week. Don't do anything for anybody and see if they rise to the occasion without you.
Yeah.
This is their decision to make about whether or not they do this, that, or the other. And that could be hard for a lot of mothers.
Mhm.
It could be the young adult saying, I'm so sick of my mom, getting involved with my relationship and she's helping me apply to medical school. She pretty much wrote my application. Then that client, their homework is to call their mom and say, I want you to step back and not do my application. I just want you to be a mom and let me complain to you about this application process. So it's a lot of coaching in tiny baby steps to get people to slowly differentiate, because if we differentiate too quickly, too soon, there's a lot of anxiety and we go back to the original
Yeah.
template.
That makes sense. Yeah. It's almost goes back to the first thing you said, as far as our templates.
Yeah.
You want to reform to your template. Um, and it's
It's always
important.
sucking us in. It's always pulling
Yeah,
us back in.
for sure. The familiarity of it all. But yeah, as you were saying that, I've been all those places. My oldest is 15, so I've been that overbearing, what is it? Is do it yourself, DIFY, do it for you, mom.
Yeah.
Where it's always growing and learning for me, where I'm learning where to pull back, or even as when I separated from their dad, learning how to not overcompensate and step in every time this doesn't happen. Mom's gonna do this, and mom's gonna rescue the day. And the older they get, there's a lot of pushback sometimes of just them being able to step in and having this, well, you always do this and you always fix it and you always figure it out. And I would probably say in the past like 5-ish years, I really had to find that balance of, well, what does that mean for me? And where do I need to just step back and let them fall and let them get
Mhm.
up alone? And even though it hurts me to watch that, to just, even if there's like, teenage years, right? They're having an opinion and they're doing things my parents wouldn't have allowed me to do, like yell, talk loudly, right? Instead of me reacting, just walk away, give them space. And it would always be like them coming back to me a few hours later, like, hey, I'm sorry, I'm so sorry. I thought about it,
Like
writing
a
future
cat
letters.
coming out from hiding, like, here
Right.
I am now. I'm
Right.
sorry.
Yeah. So I
Mhm.
think I've identified with all of those things in relationships, being super enmeshed, where I'm like, how can I make this person happy? And oh no, they're not happy. And I think that even goes back to all of these questions. Like I feel like these touch points all lead to themselves, which that would lead to the second touch point, which is our role. We're always going to play this role in some way, shape, or form. I mean, you talked about it a little bit for yourself as far as like the perfectionist. I can
Mhm.
resonate with that. And I've worked really hard to release that. And honestly, the biggest blessing I've had to do that is the more children I've had, because
Mm.
if you have more, like two, I feel like two felt like to me, that's just a juggle, right? We got two balls, we're juggling and that's easy. It's one or the other.
Yeah.
You add another ball in there, one ball. I don't know if you can juggle
It's
with
so
three.
true.
Have you mastered that yet, right? And then four is
Yes.
like, okay. And then it was a boy. I'm like, I thought I knew what I was doing. I have no idea what I'm doing. This kid doesn't take a nap. I don't have a structured schedule, right?
Yes.
So that's really the only thing that for me has probably for me at the least that I could identify that has helped with growth in all of those areas, because I'm like, I can't sustain this. That's really what it is. You're talking about being burnt
Yeah.
out. I can't sustain this.
I
I'm
can
gonna
no
be
longer function this way. It's not going to
no,
work.
no. I'm gonna be a raisin. I'm just gonna wither away and
Yes.
and be non-existent because I am doing too much. So, what are some last words just of encouragement that you have for people? Because I do feel like the awareness kicks in, we can identify some things. What are even just some actionable steps that people can really tune into just to really, I would say, like scale it back to understand that it's like they say Rome wasn't built in a day. Like how do we just take it step by step and continue to grow and evolve and not put too much pressure on ourselves along the way.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is patience and self-compassion. If you can give yourself patience, if you can love yourself, you give yourself permission to have faults. You give yourself permission to grow. You give yourself permission to make mistakes. And that's where the change can happen, right? You have to really
Mhm.
see what are my strengths, but what are my weaknesses and
Yeah.
why are they my weaknesses? And
Mm.
how can I focus on those parts of myself that maybe I've been avoiding and now I have to deal with? Because if I don't change, I'm going to keep doing what I'm doing. I'm going to keep getting what I'm getting. If I don't change, I don't see this ending well. So
Yeah.
what do I have to do a little bit differently? And that's when you call in your people, you call in your healers, you call in a therapist, you call in a coach, you call in some kind of guide that has an objective
Mhm.
perspective to point your blind spots out to you. And then it's up to you in between those sessions to do that work.
Yeah, I love that you just said that because I think if there's one thing that some of us can avoid, it's that step right there.
Yeah. You don't have to deal with it then, right?
Yeah.
You don't have to deal with it.
Yeah, yeah. Oh my God, this has been such a great conversation. I feel like we could talk forever, which
Me
oh my gosh,
too.
I feel like that. I feel like you have such a wealth of knowledge, and I'm grateful. I'm grateful that you've even chosen to, you're one of those people that have chosen to follow your path and to help people because we do need guidebooks and we do need more tools and people to sit down with us to help us navigate these things because even when the world is on fire, one of the things that I remember and that I feel like I've learned so deeply since 2020 was that like we need each other. That's
Yes.
it. Like I think when
Yes.
you said it in the beginning, we talked about the individualism. While individualism is great, we actually need each other.
We need community.
And community is how we problems become less because it's the individualism that is going to keep us feeling not only disconnected, but connecting together to solve the problem.
Yes.
Right?
Through ancient times, we were called to community. We needed other human beings to help us survive and learn and exchange
Yes,
knowledge. And now we're just so isolated. And we could probably all go home and never come out of our house again, get our food delivered, get our groceries delivered, just live on social media, talk to people on Zoom. Like we could exercise at home. You could literally do whatever you want from your house forever.
totally.
But that's
Totally.
the problem. I think that's why we're all disconnected and anxious and
Yeah.
depressed at time. We need to go back to community and having our people.
1000%. Yeah. I think it was two podcasts ago I did about the loneliness epidemic. So I'm grateful that you mentioned that. So go listen to that, y'all. If y'all have not listened to that yet, because that gives you some guides as well as to how to break out of that. Because I don't trip when things are happening in the world, I'm like, just have your people, just connect with people, and we're good. We're good.
Mm-hmm.
We're fine. We'll figure
Mm-hmm.
it out. Let us know where can we find you? If someone's interested in a consultation, where can they connect with you?
Absolutely. So my website is carinocounseling.com. I have a bunch of podcast episodes. I'm not recording right now. I hope to get back into it, but that's called Thoughts from the Couch. You can tune in there. And my Instagram is also Thoughts from the Couch. So feel free to DM me there.
Amazing. And we can't wait. I mean, I can't wait at least to hear, just watch you more and just see where you continue to bloom and expand and in your teachings. And y'all, just for not for nothing, if you do head over to her Instagram, she has some brilliant tips that she does have there just for your growth and your understanding. And I feel like we could do another podcast, honestly, on just
Yeah.
even blended families. And I think we've talked so much about I think some great pivotal foundational points. So if
Yeah.
you're listening on YouTube, leave a comment. If you're listening on Spotify, leave a comment. If you're listening on Apple, leave a review. And let us know what you think about this episode. Make sure you follow Justine. And thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate it. And for everyone listening, I will see y'all on the next podcast episode. Bye for now.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.